We all know NASA today, an organization that supports space exploration. It's willing to send humans to outer space to explore a completely new realm that any human before have never imagined would happen. Of course, NASA had made so many dreams come true, such as launching space shuttles, making satellites for GPS navigation, and establishing the International Space Station. NASA had inspired so many people and encouraged so many life lessons from its missions. But what made this all happen? Where did we even start with space exploration companies in the first place? It was the year 1945, where in Germany, Hitler's troops surrendered to the Allies, officially ending World War II in Europe. With Germany's defeat, the Americans stole their useful V-2 rockets to help with NASA's technological advancements, as the scientists didn't develop too much in the Second World War. However, the Soviets did the same thing, just gaining the same advantages as the USA did. In fact, the Soviets were intending to use the rockets for nuclear warfare. The US and the Soviet Union disagreed and quarreled over political conflict and consequently developed bad diplomatic relations between the two countries. Eventually, in 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, the first satellite out into space. Many people in the United States were amazed at how successful it was and cherished the beepings of the spacecraft heard from the radio. On the flip side, the Americans were ready for change. Scientists veered their focus slowly, one by one, to space exploration led by the famous Wernher von Braun, who helped design the prototype of the Explorer 1 rocket. In 1958, months after the Russians sent out Sputnik, the Americans launched the Explorer 1. Public humiliation was on the rise as the Americans were behind at space exploration goals. In 1961, during the bang of the Cold War, the 35th President of the United States, President John F. Kennedy, gave the speech in Congress about placing the man on the moon. Here's what he said.
First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
Of course, Kennedy's expectations for America were rough, even for the best scientists in America. In fact, Americans were even doubtful that they would even accomplish such a dream. Earlier in the year, Yuri Gagarin was sent out into space by the Soviets, making himself the first man in space in human history. To take action, NASA started a new mission series named Gemini, specifically missions to acquaint humans to the extreme conditions of space. As a result of 4 hard years of working, NASA accomplished many things such as sending the first American to walk in space on Gemini 3, Gemini 7, proving humans could stay in space for 2 weeks, and finally Gemini 10, connecting 2 modules together in outer space. Unfortunately, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963 and didn't see the great goals NASA had achieved so far. It was a disaster that caught the attention of the Americans, but NASA still had to keep going with space exploration progress. The end of the Gemini missions signified that veteran astronauts and pilots were ready to study a whole new world nobody had ever landed on before. In 1966, NASA entered a new series called Apollo, named after the Greek god of the sun. This mission specialized for astronauts to land on the moon and return safely, as Kennedy requested. However, the Apollo missions did not start off well. In 1967, the Apollo 1 crew, Gus Grissom, Edward Higgins White, and Robert B. Chaffee, died in a tragic fire that engulfed in the command module. NASA quickly learned from its mistakes, including realizing that the cabin was full of pure oxygen, making it extremely flammable. Despite that accident, there were many great things that NASA had achieved. Apollo 2 and 3 were successful in the year before, in 1966, test launching Saturn V rockets. In addition, NASA launched the Apollo missions 4 to 6 unmanned and 7 to 10 with men in the modules, all preparing for what was about to become the biggest accomplishment of human history. After so many preparations, on July 16, 1969, the Saturn V rocket that would send the modules out to space on Apollo 11 blasted off into the blue sky, marking the start of the most remarkable moment in the history of mankind. Later in the mission, Aldrin and Armstrong landed on the moon and had Armstrong take his first step on the surface. Neil Armstrong said these few but so impacting words.
Small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
This event happened on July 20th, 1969, marking the accomplishments NASA had accomplished over the last decade of space exploration. 19 minutes later, Buzz Aldrin stepped out to help Armstrong to plant the flag down to establish they had done it. When they returned safely to the Earth, there was one thing certain. This was just the beginning of a whole new era. After the conclusion of Apollo 11, as NASA agreed to send astronauts to participate in the combined Apollo-Soyuz mission, where the captains of the two teams shook hands after connecting the Soviet and American modules together. The handshake marked the end of the space race and resolved any diplomatic conflicts between the two nations. The end of the race called for NASA to continue its space exploration missions, where more new discoveries will be made. The space race brings many insights on how successful the space race was and how it encouraged many more missions. In 1977, Voyager 1 was launched, making the journey out into outer space and beyond. In the 80s, NASA launched another mission designed to make a shuttle, specifically to help design the newly planned International Space Station. Lastly, in the 20th and 21st century, the Hubble Space Telescope was designed to see through the layers of space-time. The discovery of water and other bodies of land gives us information of the possibilities of life out there in other star systems. With NASA, we can accomplish anything to infinity and beyond.